Step 2 is about building that bridge. You cannot build a bridge until you've disarmed them with love. I mean, have you ever tried to build a bridge under enemy fire? That was a rhetorical question because I seriously doubt any of us have ever tried to do that. But I imagine that would be something that is not likely to succeed. Anyways, moving on. Acts 17, verse 23. This is what it says. For as I went around and observed closely your objects of worship, I even found an altar with this inscription, to an unknown God. Therefore, what you worship without knowing it, this I proclaim to you. Well, look, as Paul was anger walking through Athens, he finds this one statue to the unknown God. The Greeks were worried that there might be a God out there that they failed to show proper respect to, and that God may get angry and punish them. And this is the great insecurity of polytheism, isn't it? You just never know. You never know if you are in good standing with the gods. There are just so many of them, and they don't exactly care to reveal themselves all of the time. This, I think, is why Paul compliments them on their piety. It's not just an attitude that our gods are better than yours. You only make a statue to the unknown God when you sincerely want to show respect to the divine, when you want to show respect to everyone's gods. Now, Paul uses that and announces that he has come to tell the Athenians all about this God that they don't know. Again, genius, because what are they going to say? No, Paul, I think the God you're describing, that's not the unknown God. I mean, they can't say anything because it's an unknown God. They don't know anything about it. So it's the perfect way to build a bridge to them. Later on, of course, Paul will be quoting from their philosophers. He's not quoting Moses. He's quoting from their team to show that we have some truths in common that maybe we never realized. Paul is looking to build, to find, to point out some common ground. To go a little bit deeper, Paul is building a bridge by entering their world or their worldview. Imagine you are a missionary on an island where the people worship the sun, moon, and stars as gods. You probably won't get anywhere by saying, those gods are false, just giant balls of gas in the sky, except for the moon. Let me tell you about the true God who came in human flesh and died for us. Rather, you have to probably explain what you believe in terms that they're going to understand. How might you reach them? You might begin with, there is a great sky god who rules over the sun, moon, and stars. He is the great creator. We might flinch at that kind of language here in Christendom, or even in our post-Christendom, right, where Christianity is still very popular. But you have to look at it from their perspective. They're not ready to understand the mystery of the incarnation, the death, the resurrection of Jesus. The bit about the sky god is just a framing device so that you can take their entire theological worldview and place it in a context that they can understand. I mean, you mean my sun god isn't the most powerful being in the universe? Yes, that's what I mean. And then you can go tell them about your God, right, as time goes on. I think you get the general idea here. You often have to explain something in a way your audience will understand from their worldview, from their perspective, in the language that they use. You have to introduce what you believe in a way their worldview can accept. We actually already know how this works. Have you ever heard the old bear saying, if it's black, attack, if it's brown, lay down, if it's white, good night? Have you ever heard that, like hiking or whatever? Well, people debate how true it is. Let's not get into that. But let's assume it's true for the moment. We are told that when you encounter a brown bear, you should lay down and play dead. Why? Because in the bear's worldview, such as a bear has a worldview, that means you're not interesting. You're dead, you're lifeless, you're limp, they don't want to eat you. Black bears are more easily intimidated into walking away. So you should make yourself big, loud, scary, and they'll conceivably run away. As for polar bears, the moral of the story is to fast and pray, which in this case means pray very fast and hope for a miracle. Underneath all of this advice is the idea that you have to enter the bear's worldview. You have to see yourself as the bear sees you. You have to appear in a way that they would understand, and that is bear missionary work. You see this in the Chronicles of Narnia as well, specifically the first book. The story is about some children who wander through a wardrobe into Narnia, where they meet a lion named Aslan who created the world and who will eventually sacrifice himself to save them, rising again after a few days. I'm really sorry if I spoiled the plot for you, but the books have been out for 70 years. So Yeah. My point is that C.S. Lewis is basically telling the Jesus story with metaphors and imagery that children would understand. He is entering not so much a worldview in the case of children, but their world, right? How does a Jesus story, how could it be understood from their eyes? Jesus does this in Luke chapter 5. Jesus does this a lot, but here in Luke 5, this is how Luke describes it. Now Jesus was standing by the lake of Gennesaret, and the crowd was pressing around him to hear the word of God. He saw 2 boats by the lake, but the fishermen had gotten out of them and were washing their nets. He got into one of the boats, which was Simon's, and asked him to put out a little way from the shore. Then Jesus sat down and taught the crowds from the boat. When he had finished speaking, he said to Simon, "Put out into the deep water and lower your nets for a catch." Simon answered, "Master, we worked hard all night and caught nothing, but at your word I will lower the nets." When they had done this, they caught so many fish that their nets started to tear. Peter's whole world is fishing. So Jesus appeals to Peter from the world of fishing by showing himself to be the master fisherman, right? This builds credibility with Peter. Peter gets this. Peter gets this. How does Paul enter their worldview? Well, as we said, he's going to present his God as the great unknown God the Greeks were already worshiping. He has entered their world, uses their language, and explains his God in terms they can understand. He tells them, the God that is unknown to you is known to me. So let me tell you, everybody wants to be filled in, right? Nobody wants to be ignorant. We all want to learn what we're missing. And this is what Paul is appealing to here. He has built a bridge to them. And in this moment, the Jewish and Greek worlds are now linked. They've been bridged through this idea of the unknown God. And this approach really requires empathy. You really have to understand how the other person thinks. You have to know them. You have to have listened to them.